my OBS is working, which it is, which is nice.
Just presume it's working. How are we doing?
I was just saying, it like froze for a bit then.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fine. It's definitely saying started streaming, so hopefully this is working.
Yeah. Well, I've left the sound. I'm playing the stream as it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let me know
So
if you
it's
can hear
working.
me.
Sound's working. Okay. So how are we doing?
I'm good. I'm all good.
Good.
How are you, Chris?
Yeah. Very good. It was nice to have you up last week. That was fun.
I know, it was fun.
Now back to our usual not sitting in the same place, but still discussing politics.
Yeah, we're just on Skype now.
Yeah. Which sometimes means that I butt in randomly through your conversations,
I've just realised I'm not showing your screen.
So, I'll apologise for that already, if I'm making those kind of claims.
There you go.
Anyway, today's topic is was meant to be Thatcher. We were going to have this discussion on Thatcher.
We did.
But I feel rightly so. We've changed the topic. I feel this has been at the forefront. Listening to LBC a lot on BBC. Charlottesville and what's been going on has definitely been dominating the political sphere and news front for the last week. And so I feel it's right that we give our say, have a discussion on the topics that are around it, and feel our way through what's been going on, what's happening.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the time is right to talk about Charlottesville. It's going to be. I think it's been in the news a lot recently. I think that the retrospective on Thatcher is coming. By the way, I have put that in the description.
Yeah. I look
that
forward
will
to that.
be coming next
really
week.
Do. And have you got Douglas Murray's book or ordered it yet? Please say yes.
I actually haven't. I've been quite busy, so I haven't really. I am going to order it at some point. I still need to root out that Amazon gift card, but I'm clearing my room out actually. So that's why when I find it, I'll probably use it.
Okay, well, why don't we jump in? Why don't we get going?
Yeah. So I think the best place to start, really. Sorry if I seem a bit out of sorts. I'll just need to clear myself. There we go. All right. Okay. There we go. I'm on the right article now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Normally I have them running in order on my browser, and I haven't.
So we might pop around a lot.
So it's going to pop around. But yeah, today we're obviously discussing Charlottesville, and I think the best place to start is with what happened. I think.
I think let's take it to basics.
Let's the events
of
what was going on. So first thing to note is, obviously, if you've seen this in the news already, there's been riots in Charlottesville surrounding an alt-right march involving members of the alt-right called Unite the Right, and this involved number of different members of alt-right groups, white supremacist groups. I think the KKK were the was David Duke on record there. I think
David Duke. I think he might have been there, but I know Richard Spencer was definitely there.
I thought they interviewed
I think he was, yes.
David Duke about it.
But I think he's definitely at least commented on it.
Oh no, he has. Yeah, I've got the article here. David Duke thanks Trump for condemning the leftist terrorists. That was
get back on topic.
His line on it.
Get back on topic.
Yeah. Of course. Just go back to the. But obviously, when the alt-right come, it's obviously not. It's as and the. Where the flaming hell is my voice today? Right. So the alt-right were protesting in Charlottesville, protesting the demolition of a statue of Robert E. Lee, the Confederate general in Charlottesville, Virginia. Hence why they organised the march. This was going to be going on for a few days, but obviously where there's smoke, there's fire, and we saw a counter-protest organised by Antifa, the Anti-Fascist Action Group. And obviously things with those two groups became quite heated, and violent protests broke out, and it led to the death of a girl, a woman of 32, and the death of 2 police officers, I think, as well, in a helicopter accident. But
yes,
that was obviously not related to this. But Heather Heyer, 32, died when the protesters clashed. She was run over by a car, I think, wasn't she? It was a really horrific death. Like, you've probably seen the clips.
Who? Heather Heyer?
Yeah, she was
Yes, she was run over by a car, yeah.
But a few more were injured as well, I think, when they ran through. There's obviously a picture of a black gentleman who was also flung by the car. Well, obviously, I think he survived, didn't he?
Yeah, I think there's only been one casualty from that specific incident. Yeah,
I know, but it's, you know, my one thought on this was, like, my initial thoughts on this was about the death of Heather Heyer was how avoidable it could have been. Like, there was no, you know, it's a terrible tragedy, and it could have been avoided if these two, like, you know, due to the clash of these two groups. Like, what do you think, Chris? What do you make of all the events that have been going on?
Yeah, so as you've explained, Charlottesville, I think it's important to outline first that this was an approved protest by the alt-right. They had been approved to hold this march about the statue of Robert E. Lee being taken down. I don't know if many people on here will know a lot about Robert E. Lee, but he has a very bad record in terms of slavery. There's a lot of documentation within history that shows he was very cruel to his slaves. He encouraged his overseers to beat them very heavily if they tried to escape, kind of thing. But that wasn't uncommon in those kind of times. But he's very much seen as quite a central figure about holding on to the ideals of slavery, which isn't exactly something you want to be heralding as a monument. I wouldn't be, you wouldn't be, but the alt-right does, and the alt-right wanted to march in protest of taking this down. Interestingly enough, Trump's comments today have been that he is worried about statues being taken down, about historical figures and America losing its sense of history. It's just on BBC News this morning.
Can I come in on that, actually?
I just want to ask you a question, actually, Ferris. So you might, if you could make your own comment and answer this as well. Do you think that obviously there was the what's his name? Was it Trafalgar Square, Leicester Square? It was in the UK. There was a movement to take a statue down. Very famous.
Was it a statue of? Well, I think I can give you a better example. Actually, somebody was arrested. A member of the British Libertarian Party, a very small group in Britain. Somebody was arrested for hate speech, for quoting Churchill's *The River Walk*. Actually, a book by Winston Churchill about his time in South Africa during the Boer War. Somebody was arrested for that. Like, this was the point I wanted to make. Like, when Trump says he's afraid of statues being torn down, I think he does make a point. Like, I think, personally, for 2 reasons. One, Robert E. Lee was obviously a Confederate general, and so a statue of him standing in the South that was part of the Confederate, like, in Virginia, which was obviously a Confederate state, makes sense. That's a major part of that state's history, and I believe that regardless of what Robert E. Lee stood for, good or not, should stand, because people need to know who this person was and how infamous he was in history as a Confederate general. Like, you know, he shouldn't be remembered with valor, but he should be remembered for his infamy. I think there's a point to be made there. And also, secondary, I think it shows a lot about how the statue itself has become a symbol and less of a historical, you know, of a historical figure. It's become more of a symbol for racism and slavery between these two groups and what they've symbolised it as. Like, the fact that the statue was being torn down in itself was wrong from a historical point of view, but as soon as the alt-right protested it being torn down, it became this symbol of racism that needed to be torn down, and that's when you see Antifa come in to ensure that that does happen. And there is a clip of them, actually, I think, tearing down a statue of similar origin during the protests, and I think that's the case. I'll look it up, but Antifa
Yeah, no, but one of the things that I'd like to say on that, and just sort of trying to come back at what you said there, is I would disagree with Trump's marks, and I would disagree with yourself that there needs to be this kind of statute to encourage freedom of speech.
Not freedom of speech.
Well, let me finish. Let me finish. Right, let me finish my claim. Okay, Lee should be remembered. He shouldn't be erased from history. What he did should be discussed, because it's obviously important when you have disasters, when we experience racism, when we experience any these indifferences, discrimination, etc. It's important to discuss these issues, reflect on the history, and learn from it. However, does removing a statue contemplate getting rid of that aspect of history? In my opinion, no, it doesn't.
Well,
and is it a good idea? Do you see in Germany lots of statues to commemorate Nazis on the purpose that, oh, well, it was our history? No, we discuss the Nazis, we talk about German history, but we don't throw up statues, because, quite frankly, they don't deserve those statues. And the second point I'd quickly like to make is this as well.
Sorry.
The second point I'd like to make on this quickly is this as well. Lee was actually quite famous for not wanting a statue of himself. He argued that no one in the civil war movement should have been given a statue. He was massively opposed to that idea. He didn't want his own statue. And actually, I think there's plenty more people for the Antifa to be sort of heralding up as a statue rather than General Lee. But I don't see your argument. And Kian has commented on the live post. Thank you for tuning in once again, Kian.
Sorry, I didn't see.
Saying again that, they should be remembered, but they don't deserve statues, and that's my point, and I would completely agree with that.
Actually, I can see where you're coming from there, but I think it's the act of tearing down the statue. I think, I think I do agree with what you're saying, that they shouldn't have a statue standing there, but I think that the case can be made that, if the statue is standing, now that the statue's been made and it does stand there, is it a monument to slavery? Is it a monument to or is it a monument to history? Is it a monument to either of those symbols, or is it what these groups create, in terms of these symbols, what they make out of these symbols and what they imply? I think that the statue itself isn't doing any harm, is it? It's a statue. It's a monument. That's all it is. It's a statue. But I know that a lot of people will connotate that with different things. I remember, and I think that we need to be careful though, when we put statues up and when we take them down. They should be remembered for sure. But I think that the act of tearing down a statue, in protest to something, it shows the acts and intents of the groups that want it torn down, and are willing to go outside of the law to do it. It's not the problem with tearing down the statue I have, it's the circumstances under which it's been torn down. Do you see where I'm coming from there? It's done for reasons of ideology. In my opinion, it seems to me that Antifa have gone further with this to tear this statue down without the permission of the law for the sake of their own ideological purity, as opposed to carrying out the government carrying it out themselves and tearing down the statue as it was scheduled for demolition, which the alt-right obviously were trying to avoid for their own ideological satisfaction.
Right, I'll make a few quick points to try to come back at that. You were talking about, what does this statue represent? And actually, I think it represents neither of the two things that you said it does represent.
Can I just make a quick clarification?
Doesn't represent... Yeah, go on.
Make a quick clarification. I don't think it represents either of those things. I see a statue as a statue. Simple as that. It's what these groups see it as.
Okay, so first of all, right, I'll make... The statue represents... I don't think the statue even represents just a statue. But a statue is... When you put a statue of someone in your home, a picture of someone in your home, you are commemorating, honouring, acknowledging what that individual has done, the relevance they are to you, the progress or the things that what they've made, whatever the impact they've had. That's why you have a statue. So clearly, saying that the statue in that kind of context is acknowledging a figure who's played a key part in racism. What I will and the slave trade. What I will also say is to come at your point where you said a statue is a statue. It doesn't cause harm. I don't think that's a legitimate statement. And I feel one of the things that has quite clearly been shown by these riots in Charlottesville is that having a statue like this, the fact the alt-right are so keen to protect this statue, arguably shows how statues like this legitimize the alt-right as a movement, and as a movement with legitimacy. And I would also say that there are many things in history that are stood there to represent, and they have been torn down. The French monarchy, the Berlin Wall.
ISIS is a really good example of that sort of group that tears down statues. Like just to bring that up briefly. Sorry, I'll let you finish.
The last thing I'd just sort of say as well to come back at one of the things you said. You tried to make a claim, and one of the things I have to think we have to be careful on, and me and you, I think we both agreed in outlawing what has been disgusting from the alt-right and from the extremist left movements that have, and Antifa that have gone on. But what we can't do is just say the left tried to tear this down, and Antifa tried to tear the statue down. They didn't.
Chris,
no, they did. No, they didn't. That
didn't. In Durham, North Carolina. This was in North Carolina, by the way, not the same statue we're talking about now.
Exactly. No, yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Don't make the claim they tried to tear down the statue in Charlottesville. That's not true.
Yeah,
and
sorry.
The movement to actually get that statue moved down was not launched by Antifa. It was launched down by the people who live there. It's a legitimate request to tear down a statue that obviously to them, the people who are living there, and Heather Heyer was a local. She was someone who lived in that local area and didn't like, obviously, this fascist anti-right symbol, alt-right symbol. And so there is a real legitimacy to the point that this statue is actually wanting to get teared down for. That does not mean that the movement to keep it standing up was also illegitimate. However, I just feel there's definite reasons to not want a statue of someone who is clearly an advocate of the slave trade.
Yeah, but the point I mean is the statue in North Carolina was probably only torn down in light of these riots. Like the timing's perfect, and we don't know if it's obviously not the same statue. We know that for sure, but we know that this statue was obviously torn down, and I think was obviously torn down for the reasons that I mentioned before about the case for ideological purity and what have you. Like I think that it's definitely different in Charlottesville. Like the people in Charlottesville wanted the statue of Robert E. Lee taken down, and I can see that as a legitimate request for sure. But it was I think it's when that's obviously legitimate. That's fine, and the protests, the counter protest, the organised protest by the alt-right to ensure the statue stayed up for their reasons as well, from their point of view, was also, like they had for the sake of their own wants and needs. I can't put this into words without it sounding really bad.
I'd also like to just quickly mention. Yeah, I'd also like to quickly mention as well. Obviously, these riots were intended to be about the alt-right wanting to keep this statue aloft. But there are sources who were there. One source I read in a particular article, but unfortunately I can't remember the article and I deleted it, so I'm sorry. Who actually quotes about she was there. She was at the riots. This was some kind of news journalist woman. I can't remember her name. Was
it in the Guardians? I think I might know the article you're on about.
She recites. It might be he or she. I can't remember. And he was saying about like they were chanting for blood and soil, and that the Jews were going to replace us. Yeah, so that's nothing to do. That's not alt-right chanting to keep this statue. That's no mention of Lee at all. What that is just the alt-right using this statue, like I said earlier,
Yeah.
the danger of this kind of statue is legitimizing the alt-right. And what have they done
that's
here?
What I'm saying,
They've taken that,
sorry,
and they've turned it into a way of being able to campaign and portray their usual load of racist bigotry. Jews will Jews will not replace us. Like, come on, that's almost Nazi-esque.
Well, Blood and Soil is a Nazi chant.
Yeah,
it is a Nazi chant. Like, I have seen the clip of them doing that as well, and it is truly disgusting what they were chanting.
Yeah,
they truly do believe that the white race, like, from their perspective, the white race is under threat. It is undergoing a genocide due to mass immigration, which we both know is not true. That's a ludicrous statement to make. And they'll cite immigration figures and falling birth rates in different countries to satisfy their claim, but it's not true. It's most certainly not true. Also, can I come back in about 30 seconds? My headphones are playing up, so I'm going to have to change over to my other ones. I think they're running out of battery, so I'll be back in a couple of secs. Just hold on.
Yeah, okay, so while Farah's gone, I'll just make sure I keep talking so none of you are bored or out of entertainment. I will answer Kian's other question. How many bees is too many bees? There's never enough bees statues. We should have infinite amount of bee statues that exist. I would argue that. Yeah, I think I've made my point clear here. I don't see the resemblance to the need, in terms of history, that a statue is something that fundamentally means if you take that down, it's removing that kind of history from discussion, context, and education. It's not, you know, we're constantly learning about parts of history that are dark, disturbing, slavery, for example, Nazism, for example, but we don't have statues to commemorate these kinds of things, and there's a reason, because when I walk to go to McDonald's or to my local cafe, I'd much rather walk through a nice park with a fountain than in the middle be stood a statue of, you know, Benito Mussolini.
The Nazis do still leave, not the Nazis, sorry. Sorry about that, any German viewers. My apologies. But there are still things standing to commemorate, like, not to commemorate Nazism, but to remember it for the terrible evil that it was, and that comes in the form of the concentration camps. Obviously, like Auschwitz still stands in Poland.
Yes, come on.
Still stands in Germany.
There's a specific reason those things are in standing, and one of the specific reasons those things are standing is because when you had the early 50s and 60s, you had the Holocaust denial movement, and so these things were fundamental in actually showing people that
these things
did happen, and that we need to learn from them.
Can't you say though that that's not the same for this Robert E. Lee statue? Like, it could be left to stand so people remember what he did and how cruel a man he was, and how cruel the Confederates were.
How many people go around and deny that slavery happened? It still happens. According to the BBC, it happens in every city, but, you know, it still happens. You know, slavery still goes. We know slavery happens. It exists. We've acknowledged that. We accepted that within history, as the Holocaust was not. What the Nazis did was not accepted, and those were fundamental to be aligned with that. But also, I'd argue that. Well, no, I wouldn't. Obviously, slavery. I think there's other bigger, important figures, historical sites that are relevant to slavery than a statue of Robert of Lee in Charlottesville. That's not got to be your figurehead statue to represent slavery.
But I think that I'm just stating it as an example.
But I agree with you on the point that slavery, the existence of slavery, what happened in America needs to be continued to be discussed, but it needs to be discussed, but not necessarily made into statues and commemorated.
Not commemorated, but remembered. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Is that what you mean? I agree with that completely.
Shall we move on to the next?
I think we should. We have a lot to discuss today, and it's nearly 5 o'clock, which is inconvenient for me because my mum comes in at 5, and I was supposed to have this done by 5. So let's crack on.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're talking.
Where are we going now?
We thought we should go. I think we should go now and move on to the two movements that obviously clashed in Charlottesville, Antifa and the alt-right. And while the alt-rights have been covered quite heavily in the media, and obviously a lot of people know a lot about them, I think we should start by looking at Antifa as well. And
So why don't we start with Antifa? Let's start with Antifa.
yeah, I agree. I completely agree, because I think a lot of people have been getting behind Antifa and want to support them from what they've heard on the news, but I think that, call this a public service broadcast, if you will, from us, that this group is not something you want to be a part of, really. Like, they are very much an anti-fascist group, but some of the methods they use and they're willing to use violent protests, and some of the other things that they're willing to do are downright disgusting. Like, if you truly cared about being anti-fascist, you wouldn't take to them and beat them up. This comes back, I suppose, to the start with Antifa and the Trump inauguration, because that was the first time we really saw a black bloc march in the US, in Washington. And obviously,
Yeah, really. Just can I quickly come in on that? Just really quickly. I'll then throw it back.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to comment on that. You know, a quite renowned professor called Gary Lafree, who's a researcher in Maryland. Yeah. Anyway, he's quite a renowned professor anyway in America, and he looks a lot. His specialism is extremism in America and wider Western Europe. And one of his comments is that, you know, he was looking at where does extremism come from, and what ebbs extremism, what gets it to grow. And he said the sort of three things that get extremism to happen, grow, or, you know,
I imagine economics is probably one.
One of them is a charismatic leader can obviously encourage one. Incremental changes in society. So something like
mass immigration would probably
immigration, economy kind of thing, etc. Yeah, and then seismic events like a war happens or an election, and there you go. That was his kind of reasoning, and he'd back you up there. He would say that the election was a real key point in this growth of the movement.
The
anyway,
election of Trump is what has created this group, but the precursors for this group are definitely there. Like,
Antifa as the kind of basis of a anti-fascist left group has been about since the 1920s. You know,
but I think the best place to start with Antifa is the flag, is the actual symbol that they walk under, the red and black banner.
To start is just explain what they are first. Antifa is, for those of you who don't know, just because some of you might come onto this channel with no information whatsoever, Antifa is short for the anti-fascist. That's what they're named.
Anti-fascist.
They're a group, an organisation that are in the US. They have no leader, no headquarters. They're a bit of like a network, aren't they? They sort of work among
they're quite similarly organised to the alt-right, really. They have the thought leaders, but they don't have any official leader that they'll name.
They almost don't go as far as having thought leaders. They're just more progressed around.
No, they do. Like every system, every group will have a natural thought leader.
Yeah,
like
that's
people
true. Because
that
up. Yeah. Anyway, the focus of this kind of group is on opposing sexism, opposing racism, opposing anti-Semitism, as well as what they perceive as, or what you might call the left, because they are described as being on the left, perceive as injustices that exist within society. And one of the main things that they've opposed is obviously Trump and his immigration policies, and also they are big for opposing alt-right and what you might call freedom of speech speakers like Julie Bindel on campuses.
Yeah, they're also notably anti-capitalist as well. There's a very strong anti-capitalist undercurrent, not too dissimilar from the alt-right, actually. Like, the alt-right aren't exactly pro-capitalist, believe it or not, but there's a strong anti-capitalist undercurrent within the alt-right.
I would say that the alt-right is far more advocate of a capitalist society than certainly any anti-fascist group is.
But say that. What you mean the? Yeah, I know. Like,
the alt-right is more in favour of a capitalist society than
but they're not wholesomely in favour of it. Like the only reason why they reflect it more is because the alt-right is a more of a looser connection of groups, similar to Antifa actually. Like, it's a loose association of groups that have decided to come together under one banner and one name.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
The Antifa really has grown up out of after Trump's election, out of the social justice warrior melting pot from the previous.
Alt-right. That's where that's come from.
Yeah, same with the alt-right, but obviously that's more
the alt-right come from Trump's election.
Earlier still.
The alt-right in America for years.
Yeah, the alt-right, the coin was turned by Richard Spencer in 2010, but those groups and networks have existed for a long time. Like, it's probably before pre-Obama. I'd say probably. When would you say, Chris? Probably post.
What, the alt-left? When did we? I just used alt-left. I just used alt-left.
Haha! Your argument has been debunked before you've even said it.
No,
I'm kidding.
What I would say is Antifa, a kind of left extremist organisation, is nothing new to politics. I would highlight that obviously in the 20s and 30s, as I briefly mentioned, there were massive leftist, real militant leftist movements, obviously in Germany, in Italy, and then they came back around the 80s, the 90s. They've not been in existence. They've been here for a long time.
Especially in Germany.
They're very
prominent in Germany in the 80s.
She said, they tend to spike. They tend to get more active after these seismic events like Trump's election.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, since then, that's just been kept at a maximum. Also, I'd say that's what's slightly different with this kind of organisation is it's working itself as, instead of being so organised as owning its own rallies, which it does have, and separate movements like Black Lives Matter, although I'm not going to class them wholly as an extremist left movement, but especially Antifa, their main way of campaigning is to find when the alt-right are campaigning and show up and
protest.
Yeah. Yes.
Like,
this is a kind of new form of protest. That's a new form of protest.
It is, but it's an attack. Like, the only way you can really describe it is as an attack. Like, if you look at the flashpoints of Antifa, the only time they've really actually protested this year, and they weren't just countering, was in Germany at the G20 protests. In fact, I have a clip here of the G20 protests in Hamburg.
Before you show the clip, we are going to be I know you might know, we did. There are content warnings. We are going to be showing clips of violent and fighting from far left and far right groups. So obviously, if that worries you, if you don't want to watch that, we will be saying when we're going to be watching clips. Pop out the video for a minute and come back, because some of these clips are quite graphic.
I will say though, these clips are graphic, but I think it's the best way I can show that not to support Antifa. Like, they are a radical leftist movement, so they're not peaceful protesters, because some of the things they do in these clips are very... They're not what a moderate would do. They're not things that somebody who was after peaceful politics would do, just for the sake of their own ideology. It's important
because a lot of the time you can read these things in newspaper, you can read it on social media, but seeing it is different. And so I think, unfortunately, I do think we do have to show some of these clips to make it clear that this is not just something that's happening on the alt-right, it is happening on the left. I acknowledge that. So let's show the clip.
Let's just see if we can try and go full screen. It's not coordinating. Hold on a minute, hang on.
Oh,
sorry,
not
the article I'm using it on is not cooperating, and now
maybe reload the article.
I think my Firefox has decided to mess up.
Just a quick question. You were talking about Antifa's flag. Why don't you comment on that while you're loading the video up again?
Yeah, I did mention it. It's the red and black flag. It shows where they're coming from and the fact that they are anti-capitalist, because it's the flag of the anarcho-communists from Germany in 1932. Believe it or not, the German Communist Party, the KPD. Obviously, they did clash with the Nazis before they were elected under Hitler, and Hitler obviously outlawed the Communist Party, but they were the same colours, and I think that's quite an interesting point to make at how they are anti-capitalist. I'll just see if I can find that clip I had.
Well, of course they are as well. If you didn't know, if you're trying to spot in these videos, typically Antifa will be in black and wearing balaclavas. One, that's because they don't like to show their identity, and two, because they think that wearing black is a sign of solidarity. They see it as a sign of, we are here as defending injustices, and one of those injustices is racism, and so we will stand together with the black community to oppose white supremacists. That's one of the reasons. Anyway, we've got a clip here.
That's one of the reasons they would say, but personally, it's sort of not recognised in my opinion. They don't want to be seen in public and allow people to recognise them. Like, put it this way, wearing black like that and going round in a marching group, it's a sign of what these, the kind of politics that they're willing to put forward and how they want to protest. Anyway, here's the clip.
Here's the clip.
Just put it full screen.
And this is Antifa, if you didn't know. This is Antifa in G20.
Yeah, this is in Hamburg.
To Hamburg.
I'm sorry for the mobile footage. I was really
and this,
the clip, but...
Yeah, and this is not the
There's one of them just kicking over the bus.
Shocking. Horrible.
Like, those are not the acts of a peaceful protest movement.
Now, one of the things I think we've got the gist, haven't we? This is fair. Yeah, I think we've got the gist. One of the things I'd like to comment on, and looking at the video, obviously acknowledging the fact that that's not them fighting with the alt-right, and this is them obviously going out and destroying kind of shop kind of things. That's because they were obviously opposing the G20 summit, as what they saw was not very was their kind of views. And one of the things that the Education Institute in America, a very renowned institute, which analyses a lot of extremism, those kind of issues as well, what they found was that white nationalists have in total for extremism been responsible for 12 times as many fatalities as this kind of extreme left movement, and 36 times more injuries. But, however, the more interesting study that was done in America was, again, came from Maryland University, was when their department studied 15,000, they got a survey about 15,000 far right and far left kind of views, and they tended to find the far right was much more keen at committing crime against people, as the far left was much more keen at committing crime against property. That's quite an interesting point. That video arguably proves that.
I know, I'd agree. Because it's part of Antifa's ideology. Like, their ideology does come from a anarcho-communist / anarcho-syndicalist sort of mindset. Like, you saw them obviously vandalising property, trying to vandalise property, and obviously they'll do harm to people. They'll do more harm to people if it's somebody that they oppose, but it tends to be when they're in clashes that they'll fight, that they'll try and fight other groups that they disagree with. But they do commit violence against property due to the ideology. But I think that's an interesting point. What was the numbers you said on that then, Chris? Sorry.
1,500 responses is what that got. I'd just like to ask you a quick question, okay?
No, the numbers about the what was it? The fascist death toll was 12 times higher or something.
We can go this way if one. I just want to ask a quick question personally, and I have put it. When you were talking, I did leave a few comments in the live chat for people to enjoy.
I was going to say, I haven't seen them.
However, have you seen them?
I have now.
Oh, okay. Well, my question to you was going to be, why not use the term alt-left? What is your opinion of course, Trump's remarks, which we're going to go into more detail later, but seeing as though we're talking about Antifa, and you keep saying Antifa, what is your opinion on the term alt-left?
I'm just going to try and look up the article for that. Trump calling out the alt-left.
No, don't look at that yet, because we're going to look at Trump's response later. We're still on the segment talking about, obviously, Antifa. But do you agree with the term?
Well,
alt-left?
I do think, well, personally for me, I'm kind of in the middle on it. Like, I'm not on the fence, but I think there's reasons why he's right to use it, and there's reasons why he's wrong to use it. You're in the middle, but
on the fence. You're in the middle, but not on the fence.
You can be.
That doesn't make sense, because the term on the fence is used to describe being in the middle.
No, on the fence means you have no opinion, but I have an opinion that just doesn't happen to be completely agree or completely disagree.
Which is on the fence, when you can't decide.
We can play this semantic game all day.
Okay, anyway,
let's
right.
continue. I'm going to just outline my argument for this. I think he's right to... But personally, I think that
Don't try going to remarks too much. Keep specific to the alt-left idea, that term.
To the term of alt-left. Well, personally, I think that the group should identify as what they are. So, if they call themselves Antifa, then call them Antifa. That's what I believe. I don't think there's any need for any unnecessary confusion of the term. And Trump calling Antifa the alt-left and taking that identity away from them, I think will just cause more confusion for the public, especially with the way the media have been reporting on Antifa. I think it's going to make it more difficult for them to understand and get their head around what's going on.
But is he right?
In terms of
the alt-left?
In terms of what the alt-left and the alt-right believe and how extreme they are, I think to make that equivalency that Antifa are just as extreme as the alt-right by calling them the alt-left, I think Trump is right to do so, because my belief...
There we go!
Is that Antifa...
Where the hell's your fence?
Antifa are just as extreme as... I believe that they are just as extreme on one side of the arguments as the right are. Like, in terms of the ideology and the way that they think, it's all based in racial terms, it's all based in collectivist terms. The only thing that's different about it is the groups being used. Like, the alt-right, in terms of what they think, is entirely based on, for the white race, for the right race, you know what I mean? Like, it's all about that for them. But for the alt-left and some of these groups within Antifa, they're definitely more concerned with their own racial collective stance based on whatever stance they are. Like, I know you were saying before that you wouldn't class Black Lives Matter in there with them, and I agree with you in that, but I do think there are some members of Black Lives Matter that would fall into these racial collective categories, like the more extreme end. I wouldn't say that that's the case for the entire group, though, just to make that very clear. But I do think that there are some members on the extreme end of Black Lives Matter that would fall into this Antifa racial collective sort of viewpoint on the world. And I think that Trump is right then to call them the alt-left and the alt-right and term the two...
He's using the worst of us both on the left and right to try and weaponise hate so they can implement an intolerant political... Oh dear.
What was this from? Sorry, what were you saying?
Yes, okay, right. So we've just got a comment by Vincher Automori. Thank you for tuning into our channel. We love comments coming in.
Sorry, can I just read this?
The left is using the worst of us both on the right and left, trying to weaponise hate so they can implement an intolerant political correctness.
I do agree with that statement.
We must reject all political motivated violence, no matter what side it is perpetrating it. This is not a matter of moral equivalence.
It's a matter of right or wrong. No.
Okay, so
I agree
to some
with that
extent,
statement,
comments, to some extent, I disagree. I agree with the idea that we should be rejecting all politically motivated violence, and I'd just like to quickly outline my opinions why using the term alt-left is wrong. It is completely wrong. There is no such thing as the alt-left. This term did not exist.
Until Trump said it.
Until Trump said it, yes, of course.
I outlined that before, by the way, when I said that.
The reason I object to it is the exact kind of reason that this is not a matter of moral equivalence. It's not, but when you start using the terms alt-right and then you create the term alt-left, you use that then brings into question the ideal of moral equivalence.
Yeah, but I agree that both groups are morally equivalent.
I've got a lot on this. Can I finish?
Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Stephanie Carvin, who's a professor at the International Affairs, and she's a former government security analyst, said she'd never heard of this term, the alt-left, before Trump said it. And she highlights the fact that what that term does is it draws similarities between the movements and doesn't allow us to actually analyse the differences. But someone you'd actually more prefer, who I found and I thought was very interesting on this topic, is a guy called Chris Cardle. And he's a psychology professor at the University of Kansas, and it's a bit more even, in my opinion, acknowledges there's extremism on both the left and right. And he actually, to quote him, says, "Both sides are violent at times, but they don't tend to be violent towards the same kind of thing." And this is where I feel it's important to draw the distinction. So when he's writing it wasn't a piece he wrote, he was sort of quoted in something I read anyway. And he talked about not Black Lives Matter, but a fringe of it called Black Bloc. Black Lives Matter. The people who are there claiming to represent Black Lives Matter, in my opinion, aren't really from Black Lives Matter. They're more the Black Bloc, which is sort of a phrase described to some people on the Black Lives Matter who are more extreme. Of course, those are the people who went around smashing windows, burning cars in Toronto in the G20 2010. No, you did say alt-left. I wasn't having a go saying alt-left. I was saying your argument saying this is not a matter of moral equivalence, and in my opinion, it is.
When you mean that
using left like Trump did, it becomes a matter of moral equivalence. But in my opinion as well, this matter, looking at what the alt-right and the far left has done, we do have to consider the moral difference. And this is where Cardell, I think, hits the nail on the head for me. He talks about the difference between the two movements, the difference between what their actually extremist action is about. And he describes it as a difference between aiming up and aiming down. And he says what the alt-right does is the alt-right wants to discriminate, use extremism, fight against minorities, people who have a lower status in society, people who don't have power and are unlikely to be able to use the works of power to defend themselves. As the extremist left...
Yeah, but you're going into cultural relativism here, which I don't agree with.
Corporations. And I know I'm on about cultural relativism, but it is important, and to me it is relevant. Because, yes, both sides are disgusting. Both sides have, damaging property, killing people. May I remind you that it's not the far left that has killed anyone in this Charlottesville attack. It is the white extremist supremacists that did kill someone. And that just kind of throws to that thing we talked about earlier about the extreme left arguably attacking, and history have attacked more property, and that white supremacists are more likely to actually be more dangerous towards people. But I do think there is a moral question you have to ask. People turning up to oppose fascism isn't a bad thing. When it turns to violence, it is. But using freedom ways, right? They have the freedom to go there and express why fascism sucks.
Yeah, but don't you? As I have demonstrated,
quickly on the we've had, because obviously we want to comment on comments.
Sorry, I really want to jump into this now.
Yeah, I'll let you jump in just 1 minute. You fight racism with words and ideas, not rocks and fists.
Yes, I agree.
No one is under bondage in the USA today. If they were, then maybe. But until then, we must protect the right of freedom of speech. That is true, but you must accept the argument that freedom of speech extends both ways. The alt-right and the extreme left were both should be allowed to express freedom of speech. My question I'd ask, and Ben Shapiro asked this question on his channel, where were the police in all of this? Where were the armed forces?
Well, that is a question that goes back a bit further, but I'll come to that later. I want to just go back to your point that you were when you went when we were talking more about your cultural relativism about the alt-right being worse. I personally completely agree with Vincent's stance that both sides are if both sides are both willing to
but you can't describe them as equal.
Let me finish. If both sides are both willing to use violence in that way, to use violence to portray a political view, then they're both as despicable as one another, and neither of their views deserves any more legitimacy than the other, in my opinion, just based on who they're going for and why. That's what I agree with at all. I think that personally, there can be nothing but a moral equivalency between the two groups.
Oh dear.
In my opinion, if they're both willing to use violence, then they're both wrong. That's what I see it as.
Yeah, just to finish the comment, I'll remind you that 60 million people voted for Trump and not racist.
That, actually, yeah.
I never implied. I don't think either of us would imply Trump is an actual racist. I wouldn't call Trump explicitly racist.
No.
I would say
no, Chris.
we are about to go into obviously discussing the alt-right. Is Trump responsible for some of the things the alt-right, not dismissing the alt-right quicker? I would say yes. I would definitely say there are legitimate reasons that people in America voted for Trump, and the majority of those not racist, and it's completely comparable to Brexit. The majority of people didn't vote Brexit because they were racist. They voted it because of genuine concerns about immigration, genuine concerns about democracy, and to go back an elite that they'd grown out of touch with and rejected the working class of the UK. And that's completely the same in America. I would not suggest in any way that Trump was a racist. And let me reiterate that point. Sorry, thanks for that, Fairhurst.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to whip out the old dissertation now at this point. I've got an article from The Spectator up. Can you see it?
Breitbart! Is this Bright?
It's The Spectator.
Ben Shapiro is, he's a very interesting figure.
Oh, I like Ben Shapiro.
I live in VA. Where's VA?
Virginia.
Oh, wow. We've got someone from America. That's amazing. Thank you for tuning into our channel. I hope you like it. Thank you.
We're doing well with transatlantic now. We've managed it. We've connected. But yeah, I'm just looking now at what I wrote in my dissertation on Trump. On why people voted for him over why they didn't. I'm just looking for the right page. Hang on.
Yeah, while you're looking, just quickly to keep answering Vincent's page, because obviously we want to. We'll try to get back onto the main thread of discussion, but I do want to make sure that we're answering these comments. Fantastic, you've tuned in. Completely agree with the comments on the mayor of Charlottesville asking the police to stand down was a key point against that. And as you'll know, myself and Sker and Mia Sker and the Fleur side are massive defenders of freedom of speech. I will accept any kind of viewpoint, however far, however racist. I will, if it's racist, I will, I'll shoot you down.
Well, I was going to say, don't accept it, you'll refute it.
I'll see you as discriminative and deplorable, but I'll allow you to say it. You can say what you want, I'll defend your right to say it even if I don't agree with you.
Well, and I think Voltaire said it best.
Yeah, the right of free speech ends at the end of your fist, at the tip of another man's nose.
No.
Yeah, it kind of does. Anyway, let's get back onto the thread. Let's get back onto taking this conversation to the alt-right.
Well, as I say, Trump obviously went in with them. There's no way to get around that. A lot of Trump's initial groundswell of support did come from the alt-right initially, when he announced. And there's a lot of evidence to that, because obviously I think the first person that endorsed him was David Duke of the Ku Klux Klan, I believe. And it gained him a lot of media traction very early on in his run. And I think he rode that out quite a lot in his run and was unwilling to distance himself from them until after he was actually elected, I think, until he was president-elect. That was when he cut them out, especially after the Heil Trump incident at the National Policy Institute, just after Trump was announced the winner. Featuring Richard Spencer again, coming back to him. But yeah, obviously, they allowed him to become an outrageous figure straight away, and obviously and that allowed him then to play the media like a fiddle, which I do think he did very, very well. But as I'll say again, I think they did a lot to turn off support for Trump. They did a lot to turn off support for Trump, and also did a lot for him to gain support initially. Let's just have a look. Just trying to find the right the page I've got here. I've just lost it now. Like, I'm gonna quote from my own work here. Doesn't mean to say it's right or wrong, and you can refute me because this did not get full marks. It did.
What's that? No. Like, obviously, I've read a lot about Trump and his relationship to white supremacists, and even now he's in office, he's had that kind of problem. I would actually dispute the claim that Trump's stronghold of support initially came from the alt-right. The alt-right isn't as big as I think people make it out to be in America.
Yeah,
it's
right.
not. It's a minority. I think there's people who I would describe as hardline conservatives who were very quick to support Trump, but not necessarily what you describe as alt-right. And I actually think, like I said,
under the same label, I think.
Like I said, we have to be careful of saying Trump's initial surge came from people who were just racist. Now, this kind of that claim, all racists will support Trump, but not the majority. The majority of Trump's fans aren't racist. You know what I mean? That kind of idea. Now, I've got a whole list of reasons here how Trump is related to white supremacy, how he's related to the alt-right movement, who he's appointed, how he's associated with, relates into the alt-right movement, and ultimately, I don't think Trump has said a few remarks that I would say verge on the idea of being on racist. He has. They get close. He has said things that I would consider sexist. And in that regard,
that's the Trump tapes, that isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. These kind of things associate him with white supremacy. A bit similar to Milo Yiannopoulos, associate him closely to the alt-right in those kind of regards, but he's never really quite there. He's never really the one who says we need ethnic justice.
The thing I find with Milo, I want to bring this up. Actually, the question of if Milo's alt-right or not.
Well, we'll go there. Can we go there in a minute? Because I've got so much more.
Yeah, sorry. I definitely do want to go there though.
So I'll just go through a few things. I'll just quickly talk about birtherism. I think that's a good place to start.
Can I please mention Clinton in this?
Okay, right. First thing on birtherism, right? If you don't know what birtherism is, which we've only got 7 people watching, so I think the majority of people will know. Birtherism was in 2011. Trump insisted that Barack Obama was not born in the United States.
But it's not the first time that's been suggested, though.
It wasn't, and he claimed he had a very credible source, and you can imagine Trump saying that, in his very arrogant tone.
I believe I have it in my little book of Trumpisms somewhere.
Yeah, and it was, and apparently the birth certificate was fraudulent. He also insisted, and he claimed that Obama was a Muslim, and that he was sympathetic to ISIS. Now, those claims are obviously those kind of claims do associate him quite closely with the alt-right. Those are opinions that were enhanced by the alt-right. Heralded by people like David Duke, Richard Spencer, these kind of figures, and he within getting heavily involved in that movement, obviously had begun to associate himself with the white supremacist alt-right movement. Quite funnily enough, on that, Bill Maher, who I watch, quite like, sometimes quite dislike. He's an interesting figure, but I find him quite funny.
Oh no, I love Bill Maher.
Obviously challenged Trump to send him a copy of his birth certificate to prove he wasn't born to an orange orangutan because of the colour of his hair, and that was quite funny. And Trump actually sent him his birth certificate, and then tried to sue Bill Maher because he didn't realise he was joking when he said, he was going to pay him. Anyway, moving on to something that I think now more closely shows that Trump, and after this we'll go on to Milo, because these two are quite closely related. Of course, Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon very closely associated.
I have this in the article actually here.
Yeah,
Steve Bannon did declare, didn't he, that Breitbart was the paper of the alt-right, I think.
Steve Bannon is the former chairman of Breitbart News. Breitbart News, for those of you who don't know, is a pretty far alt. It was described, as Steve Bannon himself said, as the platform of the alt-right. It was constantly doing threads in support of Trump throughout his campaign. There's also a very infamous article that was published in Breitbart under his leadership that was celebrating the work of several white supremacists. If you don't believe me, the work is called, and please check it out, An Establishment Conservative...
I'll see if I can find it.
An Establishment's Conservative Guide to the Alt-Right. Coincidentally enough, written by Milo Yiannopoulos and someone else, but I couldn't remember. And
Establishment Conservatives Guide to the Alt-Right.
Yeah, and in the article, Richard Spencer is quoted as being the, and I'll quote the article exactly, centre of alt-right thought. And another guy called Steve Saylor is quoted as establishing political consensus. Now,
yeah,
there's
I found the article.
These kinds of people who were in this article were listed under the section that is titled Intellectuals. Now, Richard Spencer, brief history, a brief comment on Richard Spencer. Richard Spencer described himself as a white nationalist, although quite a lot of the media describe him as a white supremacist. He advocated for a white homeland and for, and I will quote him, disposed white race. He's also called for positive ethnic cleansing in the past. Following the 2016 election result, he was in the news for spouting Nazi propaganda when he started shouting, "Hail Trump, hail our people, hail victory."
Yeah, I mentioned that before. That's the National Policy Institute thing I mentioned before, by the way.
He was also very positive of Bannon's appointment. The other guy, Steve Saylor, if you don't know who he is, he's an American blogger and movie critic. He was a columnist for VDare.com. In 2014, he moved his blog to UN's Review, which is the so-called alternative media section in America. And just to quote him, "Race is a highly useful and reasonable classification." He argues that blacks are less intelligent than whites. And he says the issue with Anglo-Hispanic marriages is that Spanish becomes the dominant language in the household. And he says that's disgusting. So, those are the kinds of people that are described as intellectuals. There it is in this article.
I know, I'm literally scrolling through it now.
It's an interesting article.
Yeah. But
and of course,
do you think, though, that that's... the point I'm going to make now is, do you think that that this movement that's described here in this article, and as you've described yourself, Chris, is sustainable? Do you think that it's had the potential to stay glued together for that long and not to split? Like, to me, I think it's, and this has happened as well, like there is a notable split between the alt-right and the Trump supporters now that there wasn't when this article was written, and I think it was inevitable to happen.
Also, I would actually argue that throughout Trump's campaign, and although I have made all those claims, and it does quite clearly show, I'll throw a few more names out just to prove the point. Alex Jones, who called Trump amazing in 2015.
I don't think Alex Jones is alright, though. He's more just a mad conspiracy theorist.
Obviously, he advocated Jewish mafia, saying that they were involved in 9/11, said that they were taking over American healthcare. Obviously, the appointment of Julie Kirsch, who was appointed to the Citizenship and Immigration Office. She likes eugenics. Some very bizarre appointments made, and some very alt-right. However, I will make this claim, and I will support your point, actually, that although Trump is associated with the alt-right, although I think all of the alt-right would have voted for Donald Trump in that campaign, his majority of support is not with alt-right. I don't think are alt-right. I think they are just hardline conservative Republican voters.
Yeah.
And some of them, centrist Democrat voters.
And the working class as well.
Yes,
and the working class, most importantly, especially in the Rust Belt states.
I think my main criticism of Trump would be this. He didn't get rid of that support. He didn't want to disassociate him with the alt-right. He used the alt-right. He used them to get them in the election. And has given them some of their figureheads appointments in office, but I don't think the majority of his supporters are alt-right. I think he tried to feed them, give them the bait they want, so they'll just keep listening. Yeah. I would like to debate Milo Yiannopoulos, and do you want to,
this comes into what I'm saying now. Like, I think personally, Milo, Stephen Bannon, and a few of the, well, maybe not all of the people you've mentioned, but certainly Milo for sure. Like, Milo's probably the best example I can use. Would have described themselves as alt-right at the time when this ideology was more
you know, closely stuck together before you have this split that seems to have occurred between the new conservatives that were calling themselves alt-right because they saw it as an up-and-coming movement, and the actual alt-right that's basically neo-Nazis. Like, I think Milo called himself that on that basis, but after the split occurred, and some people do say as well that Milo is the reason why this split occurred, is because wouldn't call themselves alt-right anymore. Like, I think Milo does it for a very deliberate reason. Are you there, Chris? Alright, just let me continue. But yeah, I think there's he doesn't call himself alt-right now, and I think it's interesting because obviously this split has occurred and the alt-right has come out as a more fascist and militant, further right, you know, extreme right movements than it was a few years ago before Trump was elected. And I think the reason
I don't think the alt-right has massively changed from when Trump was elected. I think I've got to dispute you on that point. I think what I've got to say is,
just let me finish, Chris.
I think fundamentally you're right.
Chris, I'm not finished yet, mate. Can I just finish quickly?
Sorry.
What I mean to say is, like, the true alt-right has remained exactly the same. It's always been that way. But the people that took on the label when they were supporting Trump, I would say, were never truly alt-right, and took on the label because they saw it as an up-and-coming movement. And I think the case can be made for Milo Yiannopoulos falling into that category. That was what I was going to say, but carry on.
Okay, yeah, so what I'll just quickly, because again, like, some people might be tuning in who have no idea who Milo Yiannopoulos is. Steve Bannon just explained who he was before. Who was the, obviously, director of Breitbart. Launched his career, he began writing for Breitbart, did Milo, and his work is described as very valuable. Anyway, yeah, he's been called brave by people, Trump's first security advisor. Trump threatened Berkeley after, you know, they no platform Milo. And Milo's released a book at the moment called Dangerous. I'm reading it at the moment. I'm about halfway through. It's not a good read. Not actually really. He's not a very good writer. I wouldn't recommend it. It's quite amusing in parts. He is quite funny, but I've not found the book very enjoyable. But some of the points I agree with him, some of I don't. I would say this though: is Milo Yiannopoulos alt-right? My answer to this question is quite clear. The answer is yes. However, does he subscribe to what you consider to be the typical stereotype alt-right? Absolutely not. And that's quite clear. What the hell is this? Oh, 1 second. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, sorry. Someone messaging me about a video about some flatmate singing Wonderwall. Back to the point. Is Milo alright? Yes. It's like you describe someone who's in, you know, you get light conservatives and you get hardline conservatives. You get Corbynistas and you get Blairites, both under the Labour brand.
Yeah.
Alt-right is quite... You can use it as that expansive term. Maybe you'd describe him as alt-light. However, here's some things that might test your opinion that he might not be alt-right. Milo went, before he became famous, of course, if you didn't know this, operated under the name Milo Wagner. Did you know that?
I did, yeah. I thought...
He did. He had an Instagram and Flickr page. He has several images on that page of him wearing an Iron Cross. If you don't know what that is, that's associated with Nazi Germany.
I didn't know that, admittedly.
Yeah,
I knew he wasn't always Yiannopoulos. I always knew that, but I didn't know.
He posted pictures of himself holding books titled Hitler and saying, "Look, I've been to the library."
Oh, you've got to send me these. You've got to send me these.
I will do.
I honestly don't believe you. I really don't.
No, this is completely true. And his beliefs are fundamentally. He is racist, he is sexist, he is transphobic, he is homophobic. He is all of those things.
Yeah, but is it done for the nature of provocation, or is it just that he actually is a horrible person? This is what you've got to wonder, innit? Okay,
let me quote you. White women using birth control is bad because it leads to an inferior race that outbreed whites.
Did he say that? Did he say that?
Yeah.
I think actually not. I thought the quote was if they use birth control, it makes them cranky or something. Or was that another quote from him?
Probably another one.
I think he doesn't like women on birth control. I do know that for sure.
He doesn't subscribe. he is hated by the alt-right. But that doesn't mean he's not alt-right. Blair's hated by the Labour Party.
This is the thing, like, I think he's done that for a very specific reason, and that's to provoke them just as much as he provokes the left by some of the things he says. Like, call him, like, I remember when a lot of people were saying that Milo was a figurehead of the alt-right. Like, from the perspective of the alt-right, for a gay guy who's going out with a black man, to be your figurehead, the figurehead of your movement,
who was Muslim,
your proud white movement, it would be the ultimate insult, wouldn't it? It would be almost the ultimate insult to them. So, was he doing it for that reason, and that reason alone, or was it because he actually shares these views and does propagate them honestly? That's the question with me, the grand question of Milo Yiannopoulos for you. I think, like, you're never sure if what he's saying is true, or what he truly believes, or he's just saying it to get a rise out of people.
I think I would like to make clear as well. Obviously, after this video, go watch some of Milo's stuff. I'd like to make explicitly clear I agree with hardly anything that Milo says. However, I think he does make some important points about third wave feminism, and I think he does make incredibly important points. There's a really good interview between him and Bill Maher when they talk about freedom of speech and the power of humour to connect. And where is humour? Where is humour among the freedom of speech gates gone? Charlottesville, making the mick out of things. Where's that gone in society? Where has it gone? So he's a massive advocate for that.
It's what the extremists want, like to take the mick out of their ideology that they see as gospel. It's like heretical to them, I think. Like, you'd never joke, like, a Nazi wouldn't let you joke about their movements, and the people on the extreme left wouldn't let you joke about their movements either. And I think there's a lot of that going about in society these days, and I think that's why we call them extreme, because they're unwilling to even the slightest refutation of their ideas, even through humour, like, not meant seriously, is not tolerated. And that just shows how this is why going back to what I was saying before, I think there is a moral equivalence between the two. Both ideologies are intolerance of one another and intolerance of anybody that stood in the centre as well. And I think this actually segues quite nicely into Trump's response as well, because we saw Trump condemn both sides by saying, there's hatred and bigotry on many sides, and the alt-left came out, well, not the alt-left, the extreme left came out and said, like, and the media as well came out and said he hasn't condemned them, he hasn't condemned the Nazis, when in fact he had. He just also condemned the Antifa as well. And I think personally he was completely within his rights to condemn both groups, because both groups practice the same, both willing to practice violence to achieve.
Yeah, I don't think we should try to get onto the debate again, because I think we've had that debate.
I know, but it segues quite nicely into his response, I thought.
But I don't think you can compare the two. Anyway, there's another comment being made by Vincent. There's another comment being made by Vincent. The problem is that the MSM and the left are using identity politics to place labels on entire groups of people to discredit the core base. The core of Trump's base is not racist, nor do they believe the same views of these small fringe groups. The alt-right represents less than 1% of Trump's support. I made that point. I said that Trump's support was not completely core, is not core alt-right. It's core working class.
It's a tiny amount of people.
It's core people who are going against the establishment. It's core people let down by a Democrat Party. It's women who are finding that the Democrats are not doing enough for them. Women, of course, majority voted for Republican in this election.
47.
Yeah, so I completely agree with that comment. Also, identity politics is one thing. If you look way into our other videos, look at the Corbyn video, look at the Jodie Whittaker Doctor Who video. Obviously, we both agree on the kind of I hate left culture of identity politics.
All it does is box people into different categories and turns them into not more than a it doesn't evaluate people on who they are. It evaluates them on what they are, and that's just wrong. Like you can't describe a fully formed human being by calling them white or male or cis or trans or black or whatever. You can't do that. Like, to do that is insulting, in my opinion, and it does drive me up the wall. And I do completely agree with Vincent's point there, that the left wing and the mainstream media seem very determined to push these sort of labels to engender their own goals. I do think that's true.
And unfortunately, what identity politics does is it frames people, individuals, not you know, it frames individuals around narrative. So you have someone like Trump, who obviously in his first speech comes out and says, you know, white supremacists, and this is obviously linking us quite nicely, white supremacists obviously are terrible, horrible organisations who don't endorse them, and then the left has to criticise him because he didn't say it quicker. You know, and I have criticised him because he didn't say it quicker. He should have done.
He said it straight
on the
away.
left, you have to say that
both sides of the conflict. This is the gripe I have.
Yeah, you can't concede that that was actually good. You can't go, oh my god, the left said something that was good. And Vincent's just final comment, not final comment, he can comment as much as he likes, or she likes. The left is also trying to associate the term alt-right to be synonymous with nationalism. Nothing could be further from the truth.
There is an ethnic element to it, I think. I think you can be a nationalist, you can be a patriot. For your
May I quote back to Vincent this quote by Richard Spencer, who is quoted by Breitbart to be the centre of alt-right thought. I would like to advocate for a white homeland, for a disposed white race, and if that's not nationalism, please tell me what is.
Well, it isn't, Chris. It isn't. It's not nationalism. It's not nationalism. It's the idea of a Lebensraum. That's not nationalist. To be nationalist, you'd advocate for a USA or a UK without the racial elements involved. Like, the alt-right is very much...
He wants the white homeland. He's referring to America. He wants the white homeland.
Did he say that, or did you say that? Or did that
Richard Spencer. White homeland, white disposed white race.
Yeah, do you not see the racial element they're adding in there? Like, a lot of people that are patriotic, like, I know personally myself that I'm proud to be British, but I want Britain to be a multicultural society. I want it to be ethnically diverse. I don't necessarily want it to be completely white, and that's where I differ from Richard Spencer. But I'd still describe myself as a nationalist on that grounding, because I am pro my own nation, fundamentally. I'm not necessarily for or against racial homogeneity or heterogeneity. I'm not for, personally, I believe that if a society is diverse, then I've not got a problem with it. I've not got anything against it. I've not got anything for it. As long as everybody's willing to be pro-British and live in Britain peacefully, I haven't got a problem.
Yeah, but comments like Spanish becomes the household language, you know, like saying that English is going. This is what
I'm saying. Like the alt-right,
national identity is going. That's their critique.
Yeah, because they believe that, and this is something that why I call the alt-right racial collectivists, is because they fundamentally believe that the nation, religion, everything is based around race, and we both know that's not true. We both know that's not true, and all of these things are very separate. You know, we live in a secular society. We live in somewhere, you know, a multicultural society of our nation. So all of these things can be separated, but to a member of the alt-right, they're all collected into one thing, like one nation, one people. You know, like to literally, like it's on a poster with Hitler on it. Ein Volk, ein Reich, ein Führer. You know, one people, one land, one guide. Like that's the difference between nationalism and white nationalism. Like this idea that it's all collected in together, but you can be. It's definitely not wrong to say that you are a nationalist, but you're not a white nationalist. You can be that. Like that's very, very possible. Like Chris, I'll put it to you this way: are you like, if you're proud to be British, then you're a nationalist by that token, but you're not a white nationalist. You see what I'm saying now? Chris?
Hello?
Did you hear me then?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Okay, so I've lost Fairhurst.
Can you not hear me? I am. Hold on.
Hello?
I'm just checking the Skype call. Am I on the stream? I can hear myself, so I know I'm coming through on the mic. It must be your end of the Skype call. Yeah, just phone me back. Remember why Chris phones me back. Okay, you got me back.
Yes.
Alright, there we go. Sorry, you must have just called me.
Yeah, no comment on the page. Nationalism to me means that you advocate for the sovereignty of your country. If that's a true definition, then I'd also class myself as a nationalist.
Yeah, exactly. That's the same with me, but you don't have to have that racial element involved, you see. So that's
true, but that means they are still nationalists, but they're white nationalists.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Like, that's the difference between patriotism and being proud of your country and what the alt-right advocates for. So that's what I'm saying with that. Like, there doesn't have to be a racial element in there, and that's the difference as well between nation-state and ethno-state as well in the terminology.
Yeah. Right, do you want to move on to the next topic?
We'll have to be quick with this because my tea's done, so I'll have to eat some nice pork chops. So please, we'll just have to speed through this now because I can't keep them waiting. I'm hungry.
Okay. That's fine.
Well, I talked a bit, didn't I, about Trump's response to this?
Yeah, it shouldn't take long to just go through quickly Trump's response.
Like, from what we've been discussing, we've pretty much covered it anyway. Like,
I think we pretty much concluded you think Trump's remarks are correct. I think Trump's remarks, the first time were right, second time
what I mean,
not
the first
so much.
time they were correct. The first time they were correct.
Yeah. Right, have you got a little... You had an article, didn't you?
Well, there's not much... I can't find it now. I've got that many open now, I'm struggling to find them. Like, I've just got, like, loads and loads of different ones. Just hold on, I'll just see if I can find it. How
ironic is it that the conservative in this... just a comment to Vincent, you know, you're American, proud to be American, country of Oregon, however we'll accept you are proud American. I'm a proud British person. That's one of the reasons I voted to leave the European Union. And how ironic that the conservative in this group chat, Fairhurst, voted to remain.
Hey, the Conservatives first got us into the EU.
No.
I've got a point there, haven't I? And Labour first advocated us to leave.
Yes, that's true.
Touché, monsieur.
So that just means I've been right twice.
I suppose you're right. Yeah, but bear in mind, I was a lot more pro-left when I did vote Remain than I am now. Like, I've become a lot more right-wing.
I've taught you the ways of Leave. I've taught you the ways of Leave.
I know, but I've gone too far as well. But yeah,
Thank you.
I think we've come to a bit of a natural end of this stream, really, haven't we? So we've already pretty much discussed Trump. We both agree with his statement the first time round, and I think that he's been.
I think the second time round, he's been treated a bit harshly by the media.
Yeah.
I think when he says it was two sides of the same coin, I see what he's trying to get at. The left, the extreme left, does have some blame, but no way can you describe them as being equal. That is not fair.
Well, personally, I think I disagree with that. I think that they're equal in the fact that they're both willing to use violence to get the points across, as I've stated.
How many people died at the hand of left extremism at Charlottesville?
Quite. Well, none in that sense, but
okay, how many died by alt-right extremism?
Hmm?
How many died by alt-right extremism?
1.
There we go, done. Thanks for tuning into the channel.
That's not even. Alright. Well, personally, I think if they're both willing to use violence, then that's where I think that there is a moral equivalency between the two. But anyway, I think we've come to the end of this now. I want me to leave because I'm hungry.
I hope you all enjoyed our discussion. We've had at the top about 8-9 people watching at once. Thank you to Vincent for commenting through. It's really nice to see some American points of view. We do want to do a kind of election video, don't we? We also want to do a Thatcher one, and then still our main header, which we're looking forward to when Fairhurst can buy the book, is a review of Douglas Murray's book, A Strange Death of Europe. And has Europe lost its sense of culture? What is the problem with radical Islamic terrorism? Is Islam good or is it bad? And what has happened to European sense of identity? That will be sure to be a very good video.
That will be there when I buy the book, but I haven't bought it yet.
Next week is Thatcher. Thatcher, of course, Britain's most hated and most loved Prime Minister. And so we look forward to hearing your views, and you can look forward to hearing our views on that topic. I'm sure we will agree on quite a few things, surprisingly for someone on the left. I do have some quite fond views of what Thatcher did.
And surprisingly for somebody on the right, I hate Thatcher. So this is going to be fun next week. You're going to see us flip-flop. You're going to see us flip round a bit next week.
Yeah, so I'm excited to that.
So anyway, I will we'll see you next week. We're not, as we say, we never know what day we're going to stream. So just keep your eyes peeled. I'm sure we'll tell you.
And Vincent, if you want to comment your Skype at all, if you've got Skype, when we have the American election, it'd be fantastic to get you in and hear your comments on the American election. That'd be fantastic. So if you want to leave your Skype in the not the live chat, if you leave them in the comments below, one of us will add you, and we'll get in contact with you before our American election video, and we can talk to you about, you know, Trump, Clinton, Sanders, who was the best candidate, what happened, why did people vote for Trump, and have a more in-depth argument on that.
Yeah, I completely agree, actually. And also, as well, to anybody else that's watching, if you have any, remember to comment. If you have any more comments to make, put them down in the views below. Unfortunately, my sources are incomplete on this stream because I haven't fully updated it yet, but I will go back and I'll try. And I've
quoted loads of people without sources. I'm sorry, but I promise I had sources.
I know. If you can find them again, Chris, send them over to me. If you can find them again, Chris, send them over to me. But yeah, if any of you want to get involved in our streams, if you have something you want to say, or you think you know quite a bit about the topic more than we do, and you want to express your opinion, then please chat with us beforehand. We'll always release next week's events, well, obviously a week in advance, so we can plan ahead. And if you're interested in getting involved, then please come with us if you're free, and we'll get you in the chat. So. For now then, I suppose that's it. We're going to sign off now. We hope you have a lovely rest of your day. And peace out.
And you enjoy your tea. So goodbye from Sker and goodbye from Fleur.
Pork chops are nice.
Oh, we do love a good pork chop. Yeah, thank you for tuning in. Loving the fact we've got American fans. My friends who keep watching, thank you very much. And we will see you next week.